Hello and welcome. FreeBSD is a direct descendant and a re-implementation of the licensed original AT&T Research Unix from the 70s. Fast forward to the present day, can this rock-solid server be tamed on the desktop? Let's find out. From TrueNAS to pfSense firewalls to Juniper routers, chances are you've already used FreeBSD systems. Unlike Linux, FreeBSD is a complete monolithic system, so our approach will be a bit different than, say, installing Arch. I've seen a bunch of wonderful videos on FreeBSD 13 desktop installations from industry experts, yet in my opinion, they try to cover too much and overcomplicate things. Today, I'm going to try and boil the install down to a reasonably secure minimum, while keeping the resulting desktop workstation pleasantly usable. Let's start our adventure by booting up a VM. So here we have our first boot. We have choice of multi-user, single user. You can escape to the loader prompt, reboot. You can adjust the console video, some kernel options, and some boot options. So let's just hit enter for multi-user. And the system is coming up. All right, we can install, we can get a shell, or we can continue to boot to live CD mode. Let's hit enter for install. And here, our default key map, which is US, works perfectly fine, but you can choose others as you see fit. So we'll hit enter to select. Here we choose a host name for this machine, not a domain name, none of that, just the host name. We'll call it freebie13. SendMail requires a domain name configured, but that's configured elsewhere, and since this is a workstation, we won't be using SendMail. Okay, so we've got base debug, kernel debug, lib32 debug. I'll install the ports. We don't need the system source today. We don't need the test suite today. So ZFS is the default, but since we only have 4 gigs of RAM on this VM, ZFS requires a lot of RAM and is pretty heavy and slower than the Unix file system, or UFS. So today, for the workstation, let's choose UFS. And we'd like to use the entire disk for our system. We can also partition here, but we won't do that. We can use Apple Partition Map, BSD labels, or good partition tables. And the default is master boot record. Let's stick with the default, master boot record. So here we have the proposed partition layout. So we've got the first slice, or S1, as the BSD label. And we've got 2 partitions, root and swap. It looks good to me, so I'll hit enter to finish, and hit enter again to commit to disk. So we'll let it fetch the distribution from the ISO and install. So these are TXZ tarballs, and they're just extracting to the root file system. Very simple. So you got the base, the kernel debug, lib32, and also the ports that I requested. And we're almost done here. All right, now it's asking for the root password. So I'm going to enter it once and enter it twice. And that's that. So we've got our networking adapter detected. So we'll hit enter for OK. Yes, we'd like to configure IPv4 and DHCP. So it's acquiring the DHCP lease and an IP address. We won't do IPv6 today, so we'll select no. Our bridge public has been detected for this VM that I have set up for KVM. And the DNS looks good. So let's select the time zone. Let's go down to United States. That's where I live. And I have the Pacific time zone. Locally, PDT, Pacific Daylight Time, looks reasonable. The calendar looks reasonable. And the current time and date look reasonable as well. All right, so we've got Secure Shell daemon activated. We don't need the mouse pointer. We don't need NTP date and NTP D because that's taken care of by our kernel VM, as is power daemon for adjusting CPU frequency, and we'd like to enable kernel crash dumps. For the security hardening options, we have hide UIDs, hide GIDs, hide jail. We can disable the kernel message buffer. We can disable the process debugging if we wanted to. We can randomize the process IDs for newly created processes. We'd like to clear the temp file system. That's always a good idea, so I'll select that. syslogd. Yes, we definitely want to disable sendmail. This is a desktop workstation. We don't need sendmail. We haven't configured the domain, so that's a separate video outside the scope here. Secure console, we can choose. You can also disallow dtrace, destructive mode. Yeah, we'll skip all that. But definitely disable sendmail. Would you like to add users to the installed system now? Yes, because best security practices, you don't want to log in as root. You want to log in as a regular user. So my username is Steven. My full name also happens to be Steven. The UID will leave empty for default. Just hit enter. Login group is Steven. Yes, that's good. We'll hit enter. Login group is Steven. Invite Steven to another groups. Yes. Wheel for root and also for KDE Plasma. That needs that. So login class is default. Yes, I'll hit enter here. And we'll use the standard Unix shell, sh. So we'll hit enter here as well. And the home directory is /home/Steven. Looks good to me. We'll hit enter. Permissions are default for hitting enter. Use password-based authentication. Yes, of course. Hit enter. Use an empty password. No, sir. We'll hit enter. Use a random password. No, not today. We'll hit enter. Then we'll enter the password once for Steven and twice for Steven. Lock out the account after creation? No. Hit enter. This looks good, so we'll type yes and hit enter. Add another user? No, we're good for today, so hit enter. All right, now we can apply the configuration, exit the installer by hitting enter again. Installation is finished, and no, we don't need manual configuration, so we'll just hit enter here. And installation is complete, so let's hit enter to reboot. And there it goes. Okay, it's booting from the hard disk. Auto boot is of option 1, which is the multi-user system, which is coming up now. All right, login. We'll log in as Steven and give it my password. And there we go. First login. Very nice. Let's clear the screen. And let's become root with su dash space dash rather. And we are root. So let's first do the patch fetching with FreeBSD-update fetch. So It's inspecting the system, preparing to download the files. Yeah, first step first is make sure you've got the latest security patches. It looks like it's found 57 patches. It's applying the patches. All right, so the following files will be added as part of updating to patch level 4 of FreeBSD 13. So let's hit the space bar here. Take a look at some of these. So yeah, bunch of kernel stuff. All right. So these are the files that'll be added. So next step, let's clear the screen. And let's do a FreeBSD-update install. So it's skipping the source component since we didn't install that today. And it's done. All right, so we should be at patch level 4, but next we need to reboot so that we boot into a freshly patched system. Maximum security. All right, we're back to the boot screen. Let's boot into multi-user by hitting enter. And there we go. Back to the login screen. All right, let's clear the screen. Let's do a quick uname. And so we're running a kernel, a generic kernel, the big one, patch level 4 from August 24th, which is relatively recent. Good. Okay, so we're patched, ready to go to the next step. So let's become root again. And let's do a package install sudo. Sudo isn't enabled or installed by default. Yes, let's go and install the package management tool by hitting Y and enter. And wants to install new packages. Y and enter. All right, and it's already done. Let's clear the screen. And let's vi sudo, and let's make sure that group wheel, of which we're a member of, can sudo. So let's scroll down here in the sudoers file. There's wheel. Let's uncomment that line to allow members of group wheel to execute any command. And let's write and quit out of there. All right, so that's done. Let's log out. And log out again with Control D. Let's log in again as Steven. So let's sudo -s to get the root shell. And looks like sudo and root's working. All right, so clear the screen. And next, let's package install Xorg. So that's the first step, is to install the X Windows system. That's going to fetch a bunch of packages, fetch or download. Okay, now it's extracting the download packages and installing. All right, and it's done. So let's Control D out of the root shell, clear the screen, and let's test X Windows by typing start X. And there, TWM from the 90s. Hello, 90s. Let's launch Xterm. This is tiny font, so I'll just spell out what I'm typing here. Sudo space -s. Let's become root. Let's do a package update, so make sure our repositories are up to date. And then do a package install neofetch as root. Proceed with action, yes. All right, so let's become normal user and type neofetch. And there it is. So we currently have about a little over 700 megabytes out of 4 gigs active in the system. Okay, good. so that works as a reference. Let's exit. All right, bye-bye TWM, bye-bye 90s. So next step, it's sudo -s, type in the password to become root, and let's do a package install x11/KDE5 for the latest version 5 Plasma desktop environment. Hit yes, and this will install close to 700 packages. So let's download those first. All the packages have been fetched, all 671 of them. So now it's time to extract the packages to the root file system, which it's doing now. All right, the latest KDE Plasma packages have been installed. So let's clear the screen because we've got a few more steps to do. So let's vi/etc/file system table. So we've got the root file system here in a swap partition. So we're going to add for KDE, we're going to add proc, the process file system. So proc is the device, mount point is /proc, the file system type is procfs, options are read-write, dump will be 0, and pass number will be 0. And the FreeBSD documentation has all the details to that. Let's write and quit. And let's clear the screen. And let's do a package install x11 SDDM as the display manager. So let's proceed. And it's done. Very quick. So go to display manager in place. Let's make sure it can work. So let's vi/etc/rc.conf. Let's add a couple lines here for the KDE desktop. So first we need to enable, or dbus_enable equal quote yes quote, all caps yes. Same for SDDM_enable equal quote yes, all caps quote. So that's required for the KDE and the display manager. So let's go ahead and reboot. So hopefully next when we reboot, we'll be greeted with the SDDM display manager. So here we are, the FreeBSD boot screen, the bootloader. Let's go ahead and hit enter and boot up to multi-user mode. There we go. SDDM is launched. Fantastic. Now FreeBSD and KDE Plasma still not 100% with Wayland, so we're going to switch to X11 here for now. They're still working very hard on it. Hopefully soon Wayland will be a first-class citizen. So let's log in. And we have our first KDE launch. And there is Plasma 5 in all its glory. Let's open up the system settings. You guys know I like my dark theme, so let's switch to dark theme. And let's change the wallpaper to something a little less glaring for my eyes. Let's see what you got. Usual default KDE Plasma 5 wallpapers as shipped. Nothing unusual here. I think we'll just choose Aileron today. Hit apply and OK. There we go. Very nice. So next, let's look at our system information. Let's click System Information, running FreeBSD 13, patch level 4. KDE Plasma version 5.22.4, KDE Frameworks version 5.82.0. The Qt version is 5.15.2. Kernel is 13-release-p4, as expected. That's the generic kernel. with everything in there. That's why it's so RAM hungry. Yeah, we're only running 4 gigs of RAM. So yeah, UFS is a much better choice than ZFS, as I mentioned earlier. So let's close that. Let's go to all applications. So basically, when you install KDE Plasma 5 on FreeBSD, you get the standard as shipped associated KDE programs, apps, utilities. So games, Office stuff. Yeah. So basically the default packages that are in pretty much every KDE 5 installation. Let's launch console. Yeah, let's make that a little bigger here. Let's type neofetch. So now we see rather heavier environment over TWM. We've got 1.1 gigs of active RAM used, running Plasma 5.22.4. All right. So yeah, FreeBSD is more aggressive, like Windows, in reserving RAM for itself. So don't be alarmed. So let's install a browser, Firefox. Sudo package install Firefox. Yes, so we'll be installing Firefox 91. This is the FreeBSD version. So as you can see, unlike Linux, they haven't ported everything from Firefox over to FreeBSD. If you scroll up here, some missing features, nothing horrible. So no encrypted media extensions, process sandboxing, reduced memory usage, crash reporter, WebVR, TCP fast open, yeah, networking. The about networking page, it doesn't work. So, but otherwise it's a fully functional web browser. You can also do package install Chromium if you want Chromium instead of Firefox. Let's launch Firefox. And let's go ahead and close that window. Let's type in the FreeBSD homepage, https://www.freebsd.org. Gets you there. Let's make it a little bigger here. So yes, very good documentation. It's a nice about section, how to get FreeBSD, documentation, frequently asked questions, some handbooks. The general FreeBSD handbook, I strongly recommend that you, when you get the chance, read from cover to cover. You'll learn a lot about how Unix works, including Linux, as an aside. So they cover everything from system security and configuration, Linux binary compatibility. You can run Linux binaries to a certain extent on FreeBSD, which is very handy for the stuff that's not ported yet. ZFS, RAID, dtrace, email, network servers, a whole bunch of stuff. Very comprehensive. Used to be my Bible, rather, about 20 years ago, the FreeBSD handbook. I've also got the forums here. The forums are very active, as you can see, with thousands of posts. Got base system. System hardware will become very useful if you need to install or want to install on actual hardware instead of the VM like we're doing today. Development, firewalls, networking, just about everything here. So yeah, that is the FreeBSD 13 release, patched and updated with KDE Plasma 5. I've last deployed FreeBSD workstations for research purposes back in the late 90s, and they were for us the most rock-solid and stable systems around. If you are lucky and have older or supported systems, I strongly recommend you try it out on real hardware, both as a server and as a desktop. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. Please like and subscribe, and until next time, take care.